Going into this match, there was a real buzz that we were about to see something special. People were genuinely convinced it would be tight, and I mean tight. Not just a close score, but a heavy back and forth struggle where every rally stretches and every single point carries weight. There were even voices out there saying Eala might pull off something nobody saw coming, and if you really slow down and think about it for a second, that was not an unreasonable belief at all. It did not just come out of nowhere. She had been through this incredible stretch where everything finally started to click. Her timing looked clean, her decision-making felt sharp, and you could see a real clarity in the way she was building points. She was not just reacting anymore, she was choosing. She had been beating strong opponents, and she was not just scraping through or surviving. She was winning in a way that made you believe she belonged at the top. Match after match, that confidence just kept building. You could see it in her posture between points and feel it when she stepped into the big moments. There was a real sense that she was no longer just visiting that elite level. She looked like someone who was ready to stay. So, when she walked onto the court in Stuttgart to face Leylah Fernandez, the expectation felt very simple. We wanted a fight. Not a blowout, not a one-sided story, but a match filled with resistance and tension, where both players had to earn every single inch of ground. That was the picture in everyone's head. But what actually unfolded on the dirt felt completely different. The scoreboard says 6, 1 and 6, 4, and if you only look at those numbers, you might think you understand what happened. But if you actually watch the match, you know that is not the full story. Something felt off almost immediately. It was not dramatic or loud, it was just off. It did not feel like a match that was waiting to turn or like momentum was hanging in the air. From the very beginning, the direction of the match already felt set. You could see it in the pace of the rallies and feel it in how early Fernandez was taking the ball. Points were ending quickly and decisively. This was not about a few mistakes or some early nerves. It felt like one player was dictating everything while the other was just trying to stay afloat. Eala was out there, and she was fighting, but she was never in control. And that is the part people do not always say clearly. This was not just a loss. It revealed a gap, a real one. This is not the kind of thing you can hide behind a highlight reel or explain away with one or two bad moments. It is the kind of gap you only notice when a player steps into a match that demands absolutely everything. You feel it in your gut before you can even explain it. So the real question is not why she lost, because losses happen and that is just part of the sport. The harder question is why it never even felt close. If you cannot answer that, you cannot really understand where she stands right now. And more importantly, you cannot see what needs to change. This did not feel random, and it certainly did not feel like just an off day. There was a clear pattern to it. Once you start looking at it that way, the picture becomes a lot heavier. What we saw in Stuttgart might not be temporary, it might be structural, and that changes the entire conversation. Now the focus shifts away from the result and onto the feeling of the match itself. Eala is no longer just a young name people are curious about. That phase is over. Now she is someone people expect things from. She has touched the top 30 conversation, and she has wins over high-level opponents. But with that comes something that changes the entire dynamic. Expectation. Once expectation enters the room, everything tightens up. Matches stop being about gaining experience and they start being about proof. You have to show you belong. You have to show your game holds up under massive pressure, and that when the opponent gives you nothing, you can still create something. That is what this match was. A test. Not a showcase or a story built around hype, but a real test of her level. This is a WTA 500 event, and at this level, the margins get so much smaller. There is less space and less time. Mistakes do not just cost you points. They shift total control to the other side. Players at this level are not only hitting the ball well, they are building with intention. They know exactly when to step forward and when to slow things down. On the other side of the net, Fernandez brought exactly that. She was calm, clear, and in total control. Even between points, nothing was rushed. It was the same walk and the same rhythm over and over again, like she already understood exactly how the match was going to unfold. And that is where the difference really started to show. This was not just about talent, it was about readiness. Because if Eala wants to stay in that top 30 conversation, these are the matches that define it. She does not need to win every time, but she has to compete. She has to make the opponent uncomfortable and push the match into a space where it becomes a real fight. When that never happens, it raises a different kind of question. Is she ready for this level, or is she still just adjusting to it? That question matters more than the final score. If this is just part of the growing pains, it makes sense. But if it is something deeper, then this is not just a loss. It is a signal. If you watched that match and felt something was not right, even if you could not explain it, you were not imagining things. That feeling came from something real that the scoreboard does not show. Go back to the first set, because everything started right there. It did not build slowly. It was there from the jump. From the opening games, the difference was visible in the rallies. Eala was just a fraction late. Not a full step, but just enough to change the shape of every point. Fernandez came out aggressive, but not reckless. Every shot had direction, and every decision had purpose. She held serve comfortably, then she stepped in and applied pressure. Within minutes, she had the break, and then another one. Now it is 4-0. Moments like that tell you everything you need to know. At 4-0, you do not just see who is playing better, you see who understands the match. Eala looked like she was reacting, while Fernandez looked like she was deciding. That is a completely different level of tennis. Every rally felt slightly out of reach for Eala, and every decision came just a fraction late. Fernandez was not waiting for openings. She was creating them. She kept Eala behind the baseline and took all her time away, point by point. When that starts happening, something very specific begins to break. It is not technique. It is rhythm. At this level, rhythm is everything. And in that first set, there was only one rhythm. Fernandez controlled it completely. The easy explanation is nerves. Young player, big stage, fast opponent. That happens all the time. But the problem is that it never shifted. Eala never found a way to reset the match or break that cycle. She held serve once, but the pattern stayed exactly the same. So when the set ended 6-1, it did not feel like a comeback was coming. It felt settled. And that is where things get uncomfortable. If it is not just nerves, then what is it? Now you start to look deeper, and the next layer shows up, the serve. More specifically, we have to talk about the second serve. At this level, the second serve is a total test of character. That is where pressure becomes visible and where confidence gets exposed. In this match, every time Eala missed her first serve, the point did not reset. It flipped. Immediately. You could see Fernandez step inside, take the ball early, and seize control. Suddenly, Eala was defending again. This was not occasional. It kept repeating over and over. Once something repeats like that, it becomes predictable. And once it is predictable, the opponent stops reacting and starts anticipating. That is when the match speeds up, not just physically, but mentally. Now you are not just playing tennis, you are trying to solve a massive problem in real time. And that is exactly when matches slip away. So now the question becomes more precise. Is this technical or is it deeper? If it is technical, you can fix it in the lab. But if it is deeper, it takes a long time. Then you reach another layer that you could feel even without naming it, the forehand of Fernandez. It was not just strong, it was decisive. She used it to open the court, to move Eala, and to finish points. But more importantly, she used it to control direction. Once a player controls direction, they control everything. Every rally happens on their terms, not yours. Eala was not losing because she could not hit the ball. She was losing because she was not the one deciding where it went. That is a completely different problem. When you lose control of direction, you lose control of time. Everything speeds up, decisions get rushed, and shots become forced. Even the simple points start to feel heavy. So is this just a bad matchup or something bigger? When you put all these layers together, the answer becomes harder to ignore. This was not just one issue, and there was no single explanation. When that happens, you have to accept something uncomfortable. This was not just a bad match. Step back and look at the full picture. Fernandez was not reacting, she was controlling. Every rally had structure and every point had intention. She was not just playing better, she was operating on a different level of control. That is what changes everything. Now, this is no longer about one shot or one moment. It is about match readiness. It is the ability to manage an entire match, not just survive points. Right now, Eala looks like a player who can win exchanges, but she is not yet someone who controls matches. At this level, that difference is everything. Once you see it, everything connects. The missed shots, the rushed decisions, and the feeling that the match never settled. It all finally makes sense. So the question now is simple. Do you see this as just part of her development, or is it a gap she still needs to close? Because once you notice that gap, you cannot ignore it. And that is where the real story actually begins.